All right. So this monologue is called Seneca and Timothy on the Nature of True Virtue. For this monologue, I've chosen to focus my exploration on Seneca and his book On the Happy Life. If you wish to know my reasoning behind this choice, feel free to inquire further after the monologue. Critical thought question is complete. The following short work of historical fiction describes a hypothetical debate between St. Timothy and Seneca in the Forum of Ephesus. As Timothy and Seneca were contemporaries, it seems possible that such a debate could have possibly occurred, though no record of such has been handed down to us. In the following lines, I seek to encapsulate some of the pagan arguments against Christianity that an early believer may have had to face. Also, I detail 3 possible responses to the Christian message, as detailed in the book of Acts and in Jesus' parables. Much of this work is quotation, simply placed in an order and stylization that renders some things more clear. The characters appear in the following order and follow the roles given. The traveling Roman aristocrats: Marcus, the tax overseer of Hispania; Titus, son of a Roman prefect; Flavius, son of a Roman general; Seneca, and Timotheus. And this is Seneca on trial. All hail Marcus Aetius Archimus, overseer of the tax collections of Hispania, son of Lucius Aetius Archimus, prefect of Gaul, venerable in death. All hail Titus Hyginus Tullius, son of Valerius Hyginus Tullius, prefect of Cappadocia, bulwark against the Parthian scourge. All hail Flavius Publius Tertullianus, son of the famed Honorius Publius Tertullianus, router of the Nubian pillagers, friend to the emperor. Blessed is he. Hail! The port of Ephesus, slaves, citizens, foreigners, all cried as one, granting honor to the aristocratic beams of light that proceeded from that imperial son, their emperor, Tiberius Caesar. The aristocrats, clad in jerkins of leather covered with breastplates emblazoned with imperial insignias, stood motionless and stern on the deck of their ship, their customary salute lifted aloft with great virility, ready to disembark at the completion of the ceremony. "Who are these men who do not kneel, Marcus?" asked Flavius, referring to a few lone slaves in the crowd with some disgust. "Members of the cult of the dead Hebrew. Pay them no heed. They pay their taxes, and that is all about which I concern myself." Flavius persisted, "And yet by not bowing to us they show dishonor to not only us and our families, but the emperor. And we allow this outrage in our provinces?" Titus attempted to console the wounded ego and dramatic outrage of Flavius. "Marcus, being our elder, has undergone more journeys than we, my good Flavius. Let us trust his word that such a slight may be overlooked for the present, until contrary information presents itself." Flavius sheathed his proverbial sword and calmed himself at Titus' appeal for Marcus's honor. Homage duly shown, the port market resumed its normal course of affairs, with the sailors of tall-sailed triremes unloading their Carthaginian grain in large burlap sacks, with cranes loading large pallets of raw bronze and iron from the mines of Gaul, and slaves, ever and always ships full of slaves unloading their human wares from every conquered people now made a denizen of the empire. Like a new Atlantis, Ephesus, set on the sea, the jewel of the Mediterranean, gleamed golden in the evening sun with its whitewashed pillars, walls, and temples. "Flavius, Titus, draw near. I must speak with you privately," Marcus intoned conspiratorially. His gray hairs framed his careworn face, and his eyes darted about, paranoid, as Flavius and Titus drew near to hear his words. The aforementioned cult has been known to stir controversy on previous occasions, and tonight one of their leaders will meet a famed philosopher of ours in debate in the public forum. There could be a controversy and general outbreak of riot if things do not proceed carefully. My superior deems it best that we attend the debate to make the glory of Rome felt, perhaps quelling any outbreak of violence by our presence, and perhaps awing the common rabble into submission to imperial authority. Flavius' hackles rose once more at the words of Marcus. "We not only possess a prefect of Ephesus who gives the common rabble a hearing with noble men, but also a grace such a hearing with our dignified presence? Such dishonor is unthinkable to my house. Better to crucify such fools for their insolence than arrive at their forum wreathed in the insignia of beloved Rome. Their very stench will drive me to dishonorable conduct. Patria ad aeternum." He spit his last poetic word of glorification like the oath of a soldier losing at draughts or dice. However, Marcus appeared somewhat subjugated by the diatribe of Flavius, as Flavius's family outranked both his and Titus's in prestige and privilege. Yet again Titus spoke. Dear Flavius, is not a Roman citizen honor bound to the man of gray hairs and many years? Let us follow the direction of our elder and support him in his orders, for we dare not leave him to the rabble if perchance aught should go amiss. Flavius again agreed. Careful who you call gray-haired and decrepit. Forget not my conduct on the fields of Hispania with the great Augustus. Titus bowed his head, hand pressed to his chest at the mention of such an august figure as the first true Caesar. Flavius followed suit. The Cantabri shall not rise again, old one, on account of thy sword. After bathing and a small supper, the men walked together to the forum among the crowds of Greek and Roman nobles, many of high birth. Every man of letters and every man of wisdom made an appearance for this night, even the prefect of the city himself. Surely the nobles of so many high houses do not emerge for the words of some unruly Hebrew, Flavius mused. No, good Flavius, they come to hear the words of the wise Seneca, the foremost of Roman thinkers and a defender of the nobility, much to your satisfaction, I'm sure. The Forum of Ephesus, fashioned after an old Athenian amphitheater, held many men. But tonight men gathered on the highest portion of the amphitheater, standing to hear the highly anticipated words, while many crowded onto the floor in front of the stage, standing just below it. The stage, a simple stone slab, stood at the focal point between the wraparound of stone seats in the theater. Soon, the reason for the crowded nature of the theater revealed itself, for alongside those of high birth and wealth sat slaves, merchants, even women, all gathered to hear the discourse. Flavius's face flushed and jaw gritted at the presence of such rabble, but held his tongue, seating himself with Titus and Marcus in the seats reserved for dignitaries, next to the prefect. An old man, robed in white, took the stage and stood till the clamor in the theater stilled to hear him. He frowned slightly and continued with his prepared speech after nodding to the prefect and the dignitaries. Men of Ephesus, tonight we shall hear the discourse between the wizened patrician Seneca, a man of means and liberality and purveyor of good speech, and, in opposition, the plucky leader of the cult of the dead Hebrew in this city, one Timotheus, a beardless young man of vibrant rhetoric. Please wait to speak until both arguments have been heard. The old overseer of the forum vacated the stage and made his winding way through the sea of onlookers to his own beleaguered seat, his face most disapproving at this breach of custom. After he left, the priest of Apollo stood on stage to light the incense fire as a request for approval and good fortune from the gods. At this, the noble crowd of Romans and Greeks stood, while many of the rabble remained seated. An old man, of noble bearing, robed in a white toga trimmed in accents of scarlet, took the stage on completion of the traditional ceremony, his dark eyes uplifted to engage every citizen in attendance. Then he regarded slowly each member of the aforementioned rabble with a stern, steady gaze. After a few long moments of mere observation, he began his part of the argument in a sonorous voice that carried throughout the amphitheater in spite of its crowded state. They say that Diodorus, the Epicurean philosopher who within these last few days put an end to his life with his own hand, did not act according to the precepts of Epicurus in cutting his throat. Some choose to regard this act as the result of madness, others of recklessness. He, meanwhile, happy and filled with the consciousness of his own goodness, has borne testimony to himself by his manner of departing from life, has commended the repose of a life spent at anchor in a safe harbor, and has said what you do not like to hear, because you too ought to do it. I've lived. I've run the race which fortune set me. You argue about the life and death of another, and yelp at the name of men who some peculiarly noble quality has rendered great, just as tiny curs do at the approach of strangers. For it is your interest that no one should appear to be good, as if virtue in another were a reproach to all your crimes. You enviously compare the glories of others with your own dirty actions, and do not understand how greatly to your disadvantage it is to venture to do so. For if they who follow after virtue be greedy, lustful, and fond of power, what must you be, who hate the very name of virtue? You say that no one acts up to his professions, or lives according to the standard which he sets up in his discourses. What wonder, seeing that the words which they speak are brave, gigantic, and able to weather all the storms which wreck mankind, whereas they themselves are struggling to tear themselves away from crosses, into which each one of you is driving his own nail. Yet men who are crucified hang from one single pole, but these who punish themselves are divided between as many crosses as they have lusts, but yet are given to evil speaking, and are so magnificent in their contempt of the vices of others, that I should suppose that they had none of their own, were it not that some criminals when on the gibbet spit upon the spectators. Philosophers do not carry into effect all that they teach, no, but they effect much good by their teaching. By the noble thoughts which they conceive in their minds, would indeed that they could act up to their talk. What could be happier than they would be? But in the meanwhile you have no right to despise good sayings and hearts full of good thoughts. Men deserve praise for engaging in profitable studies, even though they stop short of producing any results. Why need we wonder if those who begin to climb a steep path do not succeed in ascending it very high? Yet, if you be a man, look with respect on those who attempt great things, even though they fall. It is the act of a generous spirit to proportion its efforts not to its own strength, but to that of human nature, to entertain lofty aims, and to conceive plans which are too vast to be carried into execution, even by those who are endowed with gigantic intellects, who appoint for themselves the following rules. I will look upon death or upon a comedy with the same expression of countenance. I will submit to labors, however great they may be, supporting the strength of my body by that of my mind. I will despise riches when I have them as much as when I have them not. If they be elsewhere, I will not be more gloomy. If they sparkle around me, I will not be more lively than I should otherwise be. Whether fortune comes or goes, I will take no notice of her. I will view all lands as though they belonged to me, and my own as though they belonged to all mankind. I will so live as to remember that I was born for others, and will thank nature on this account. For in what fashion could she have done better for me? She has given me alone to all, and all to me alone. Whatever I may possess, I will neither hoard it greedily, nor squander it recklessly. I will think that I have no possessions so real as those which I have given away to deserving people. I will not reckon benefits by their magnitude or number, or by anything except the value set upon them by the receiver. I will never consider a gift to be a large one if it be bestowed upon a worthy subject. I will do nothing because of public opinion, but everything because of conscience. Whenever I do anything alone by myself, I will believe that the eyes of the Roman people are upon me while I do it. In eating and drinking, my object shall be to quench the desires of nature, not to fill and empty my belly. I will be agreeable with my friends, gentle and mild to my foes. I will grant pardon before I am asked for it, and will meet the wishes of honorable men halfway. I will bear in mind that the world is my native city, that its governors are the gods, and that they stand above and around me, criticizing whatever I do or say. Whenever either nature demands my breath again, or reason bids me dismiss it, I will quit this life, calling all to witness that I have loved a good conscience and good pursuits, that no one's freedom, my own least of all, has been impaired through me. He who sets up these as the rules of his life will soar aloft and strive to make his way to the gods. Of a truth, even though he fails, yet he fails in a high emprise. But you, who hate both virtue and those who practice it, do nothing at which we need be surprised, for sickly lights cannot bear the sun. Nocturnal creatures avoid the brightness of day, and at its first dawning become bewildered, and all betake themselves to their dens together. Creatures that fear the light hide themselves in crevices, so croak away. And exercise your miserable tongues in reproaching good men. Open wide your jaws, bite hard. You will break many teeth before you make any impression. I advise you, respect virtue. Believe those who have long followed her cry aloud that what they follow is a thing of might, and daily appears mightier. Reverence her as you would the gods, and reverence her followers as you would the priests of the gods. And whenever any mention of sacred writings is made, favete linguis, favor us with silence. This word is not derived, as most people imagine, from favor, but commands silence, that divine service may be performed without being interrupted by any words of evil omen. it is much more necessary that you should be ordered to do this, in order that whenever utterance is made by that oracle, you may listen to it with attention and in silence. Whenever anyone beats a sistrum, pretending to do so by divine command, any proficient in grazing his own skin covers his arms and shoulders with blood from light cuts, anyone crawls on his knees howling along the street, or any old man clad in linen comes forth in daylight with a lamp and laurel branch and cries out that one of the gods is angry, you crowd around him and listen to his words, and each increases the other's wonderment by declaring him to be divinely inspired. We have been born into a monarchy. Our liberty is to obey God, as far as is right, to form a God out of what is good. I make this speech not on my own behalf, for I am steeped in vices of every kind, but on behalf of one who has made some progress in virtue, focused on the self, and positing values from a deeply personal sense of virtue. The venerable Seneca's address to the crowd complete, he returned to his seat to listen to the response of his opponent. Every face of noble birth watched him carefully as he descended from the stage, approval securely fastened in their eyes. The rabble remained silent and watched their own champion take to the stage, a young man, beardless as mentioned before, his eyes calm, but clearly no stranger to passionate flame, his body clothed in a simple woolen robe, lashed tightly with rope, and head covered with a felt hat. It is written somewhere by my interlocutor as his first principle that a right-thinking mind never alters or becomes hateful to itself. And in another place, that the best things never undergo any change. We cannot depend upon anything whose nature is to change. For such writing, I applaud my interlocutor, for he has spoken wisely, and his words illuminate the very seat of truth. Yet in light of his recent statements, I am left with questions which I, being a man of common quality, humbly bring to the light of your attention gathered here today. Primary, how can the action of bloodletting of oneself be seen as anything less than hateful, as far as regards your Epicurean Diodorus? Secondary, if it be allowed that the best things never undergo any change, how can it be said that one progresses toward a state of virtue? Will not a man be all of the one or all of the other, in light of this statement from my wise interlocutor? Before I allow such an answer, allow me to share what I believe answers these quandaries in a single instant through an avenue favored by the people, according to wise Seneca's own admission. Sacred Writ. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. This brief quotation strikes near to the heart of our issue in hand, for my interlocutor has spoken well of the range of pleasures as well, in saying, if we assign to all bodily pleasures and external delights the same position which is held by auxiliaries and light-armed troops in a camp, if we make them our servants, not our masters, then and only then are they of value to our minds. Taken on its own, this statement holds truth, for all things created by the Maker are good, and to be received with thanksgiving. Yet in light of the desire for illumination, I proffer another humble inquiry. How can the state of change evident in the image of a military camp not succeed in one side's domination of a man, possessing his soul, working out its ends? For in another place, wise Seneca has written that the highest good is singleness of mind. For where agreement and unity are, there must the virtues be. It is the vices that are at war one with another. Yet the various methods of attack at work in a military unit fail to denote singleness and unity, and if one attempts to harmonize these units, one falls into the other trap of entering a state of change, thus proving to be undependable, unreliable, vacillatory. All long-winded talk aside, we, the dust of the earth, we little creatures, truly fall in line with the thunderous words, all fall short of the glory of God. I do not accuse merely noble men, but all men, of the same charge. For on the one hand lies the vain attempt of our empty souls to heave the rock of our lacking virtue up the hill of human nature, while on the other hand lies the complete conquest of our baser instincts, driving us into deeper darkness till all the world appears as dark as our own hearts, desperate and deceitfully wicked, ultimately ending in the ultimate tragedy, hatred of self, hatred of the terra firma, hatred of God, and the choice to deal out judgment upon oneself with the cruel knife. Judgment stands with the axe laid to the branches for everyone gathered here, and yet the way out appears readily. I commend to your attention the man of supreme virtue, of unflagging and deified Andrea, the Son of God, ascended into heaven and throned in glory, returning to judge the living and the dead, Jesus Christ, and urge your hasty allegiance to him, and the departure from all false gods and false ways, as seen here tonight. For in every way was he tempted like as we, yet without wrongdoing. In this he stands as the paragon of your virtue. As the young man ended his speech with a shameless holding up of the dead Hebrew, the crowd began to surge in anger. A few men stood and shouted obscenities, while others left the theater entirely, outraged at the breach of honor. Seneca refused to take the stage once more, noting the absurd portrayal of a dead man as more virtuous than the men gathered currently. Flavius was on his feet, howling for the blood of the wretched plebeian on stage. Titus watched with cool aspect. Yet Marcus sat with a single tear breaching the corner of his eye. Soon the crowd promised to break its bonds and rush the stage, yet the prefect signaled silently and legionaries entered, promising swift retribution if the peace was broken. As the theater emptied and the legionaries demanded everyone return to their dwellings, Marcus slipped away from Titus and Flavius, whom continued venting their displeasure. What unphilosophical rubbish! Yet how could one expect better from such a peasant as that? I vow to write to my father of this incident. To admit the common to the society of the noble for a debate on shared ground grants them the same equality with us, their betters. A vain attempt indeed, for their intellects barely get at the main theme of Seneca, Stoicism under duress, a most admirable quality for the Roman to possess. Titus responded quietly. Yet the younger pointed difficult inconsistencies in the reasoning, which I have yet to solve. I will consider these things, and perhaps talk more of this over later. Titus left Ephesus that winter and campaigned with the army in the north, where he was slain in the forests of Germania on a survey expedition. He never got his chance to discuss further with Timotheus or any other cult member. Flavius wrote to his father, who spoke with the emperor, who put an official inquiry of the prefect, his family, and all matters concerning the cult in Ephesus. Roman law would deal with this absurdity, and any who followed it and allowed it to spread. Flavius ended his days a venerated advisor in the court of Nero. And Marcus? No one knows for sure. Some say he returned to Espana, drank his wine, ended his days as a tax collector. Others claim he went to the province of Judea to investigate the cult and its teachings. Still, others swear to have seen him dining with Timotheus that night, an absurd smile brightening his careworn face, laughing with joy. This ends the monologue. So, I did have a critical thought question in place, but I don't think it's a good one. I just kind of wrote it at the end, and we've already had a pretty long meeting, so at this point, I'm just going to open the floor for any other critical thought questions that were either instigated from the monologue or instigated from the readings. You'll notice that I didn't deal with the Hume very much. I have reasons for that. But anyway, yeah, so the floor is open.
Applause? There's no space for applause? Oh, well, too bad. I think that's getting better and better. Style is getting better and better. Of course, it's flowery. Of course, it's old-fashioned, but it's not deteriorating. I think quite the opposite. So, anyhow, I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Fascinating method to deliver a monologue. No one's quite done it quite like that before. So, yes, I'm impressed.
Just different types of fiction is what we kind of have gotten into recently. So thank you for starting a back channel where you say, close the doors and open your mind again, because I'm just kind of stuck in a rut here, as you can see.
Other than that, I don't have anything else right now. So anyone else who wants to put something forward, go right ahead.
For the second for the second time in one evening, I will say that was somewhat beautiful.
I have strictly question. I did some. I gave a cursory reading. Happy Life, Seneca, which of course, yeah, and I actually thought context, context monologue. I
Seneca just sounded bitter to me. Like Seneca just sounded bitter to me the whole time. Like he was
yeah,
feeling accused.
I had a hard yes, yeah, he was for definitely effective, which is comical considering he's a stoic. I I had a hard time getting past very premise of the book on a happy life. You know, the whole thing just not. Anyways, I didn't. I gave a cursory reading to it. I guess my all my thoughts for this month have been around Hume. I really didn't even address Hume until this week, so week has been quite the investigation of.
Well, we all sort of read things from his book, so if you have a question,
Yeah,
Loft, I think we will all be able to converse somewhat.
it's somewhat like my like I said, it's not exactly a critical or a question, but somewhat like my question. He separates his book, Treatise on Nature, three books of the understanding, of the passions, and of morals. Um, I actually really liked, as I was reading book one, I got to understand what he meant, by those, and I like the division, but I got to thinking, you know, you're really going to talk about human nature, something something more to talk about, and I did get to sort of answer on that, but I want to ask you guys that, just given those three book titles and any none of them, you think Hume is
Can you repeat those titles? I just want to kind of get them down. I didn't get them
yeah,
in
so
totality.
book one of the understanding
Of
is
the understanding.
of the passion,
Period.
and book three
Okay.
of um of the understanding ideas, their origin, action, action.
I could maybe attempt an answer to the inquiry.
Mhm.
Um, from my perspective, Hume was missing everything in that he was talking intensely about passions in a very passionless way. I was telling Stephen about this over breakfast. I was like, I have philosophers in two groups in my mind. Philosophers who let you think specifically about what you need to do action wise. How do you act? What's good human nature?
Yeah.
What's bad human nature? And then there are philosophers who cogitate in this cogitation soup, and slowly the heat's turned up and you're thinking about this so much that I begin to question how much are you actually living, and do you actually know yourself? Do you actually know what drives you to do something? You, David Hume. Because it's very, I was in awe of his stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
but I didn't really know if he knew himself.
That's an interesting answer. I definitely can understand and relate to that thinking on him. It was surprising with how much surety he sorted out the psyche of humans, amongst other things, you know? Um, but at the same time, yes, it was extremely, like, from a scientist's perspective,
Yeah, that's why I didn't even
Well,
qualify to handle it.
Actually, at the end of book 1, do you remember the last chapter he had there?
Read it. Name of the chapter.
Uh, Conclusion of this book is what that one was called. The end of book 1. It's the very last thing.
You're probably gonna have to summarize it for me. I'm not certain I got that far.
That actually gave me that is a personal chapter, and I was so surprised at it because it was shocking compared to the rest of it. And he talks about his labor of this work, and it actually gave me a lot of respect for him. So I don't know what to say on that except maybe go and read it. It's about 8 pages.
I definitely will. That's good.
Wait a minute. Can you give me the title of the chapter again? Conclusion.
It's just called Section 7, Conclusion of this book.
Okay. Can you give us like the first couple paragraphs or something?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
But before I launched into those immense depths of philosophy which lie before me, I found myself inclined to stop a moment in my present station, and to ponder that voyage which I have undertaken, and which undoubtedly requires an utmost art and industry to be brought to a happy conclusion. Methinks I am like a man who, having struck on many shoals, and having narrowly escaped shipwreck in passing a small frith, that yet has the temerity to put out to sea in the same leaky, weather-beaten vessel, and even carries common life, and even carries all its variations. And even carries his ambition so far as to think of compassing the globe under these disadvantageous circumstances. My memory of the past errors and perplexities makes me diffident for the future. The wretched condition, weakness, and disorder of the faculties I must employ in my inquiries increases my apprehensions, and the impossibility of amending or correcting these faculties reduces me to almost despair, and makes me resolve to perish on the barren rock. You can just see the language here is just so intense, and you can see that he's really reaching at
struggle
at a difficulty that he's taken. And he goes on and describes even a lot of the weaknesses that he's already found in his own work in book 1, which is such an interesting way to end book 1. He basically says, that was book 1, and here's why it's not good, or here's some things that I cannot resolve myself. So, anyways, in reading this section, and he goes on and it develops a little bit further, but I liked Hume after reading that section, whereas the rest of the book, while it was impressive, was, like you said, kind of questionable. Did anything with that, you know?
Like, is this actually
is this
the way
useful for anything?
World?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could think like that. Maybe I don't wish I could
Well,
think like that. I don't know.
I suppose if I should interject here, he has 3 parts, correct? He has a book or a volume separated into 3 books, 3 parts, right? And I've been thinking about 3 actually. 3 has been my number for about a week or so. It's been on my mind, and it has to do with what I was wanting to write, or what I probably will write for Stephen. I was going to be writing a series of essays based around 3 for different reasons. And one of the things I've been thinking about with the idea of 3 is it has this stability, right? You don't have extremes that operate, I'm thinking mathematically, specifically geometrically. You have a line, you're going to have things operating at either end of extreme of a line, right? And so the basic idea of 3 is that you get to break that dichotomy, which can often be a false dichotomy on things. You see what I'm saying? You have just a single yes or no, left or right, bipolar, not bipolar, but just 2 options, right? So that's what I've been thinking about with the idea of 3. You get to go into yes, no, or maybe. You get to go into things like that, right? So from an organizational perspective, I guess a question, it's an observation that I'm putting into a question is, it seems like, because I didn't touch this book at all, is it possible that in the first book of the understanding, he is writing about the logical mind, or what we would often call nowadays the left brain, and of the passions, he's talking about the instinctive or whatnot, like the right brain. And then he tries to bring these together to formulate something so we can keep the right brain under control and also sort of keep the left brain under control so that we can get somewhere in life. Am I completely off base with this, or do you think that this is a conscious plan or just an unconscious thing that sort of happened with his organizational structure?
Not sure that he really went there. Or to give you an idea, he categorizes the book titles. So categorizes the morals and categorizes the passion. And so he says, here's a passion, and here's a passion, and here's how they're connected, or here's how they flow from one to another. So while I do see the interesting thought you have there,
Well, I guess my point would be, what does he talk about? For what you just talked about, that should be book 2, right? And you're talking about this is a passion, this is a passion. It's almost a kind of a catalog of passions, right?
yes.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so what is in book 1? Is it like a historical review of all these different thinkers through time? Is it just his personal idea on how people think and understand? What it kind of shows up a lot in book 1?
It's a little more foundational, but yes, I'd say it is a
historical kind of review.
Well, no. His idea
No.
of how people think and understand, that part of it.
Okay.
So he's talking about things like memory, imagination. Those are 2 very important
Right.
concepts that he sets up.
Right.
The association of ideas, relations in general. Talks about space and time and how humans perceive it. He talks, so those sorts of things. What knowledge is.
Yeah.
What probability is, in its relation to how we think.
Yeah.
There's skepticism, and he talks a lot about skepticism. Which is kind of interesting. I think that actually related a lot. In my mind, that related directly to Seneca. Section he wrote on skepticism. Maybe you guys, if you do care to read Hume, the entire part 4, which includes the book of book 1, part 4 of book 1, has those most interesting part from my perspective.
Okay.
Does that give you a better idea?
Does he reference anybody else specifically? I mean, this book was published in like the 1600s. I'm curious if he references like anyone at all.
Yeah, there were some references.
Okay, so he's not building a totally free form standing. Not many.
Right. What would you say, Brandon? I know it wasn't many, but
Well, he talks about philosophical schools.
yeah, that's true.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's only a reference in as much as it's only freestanding in as much as I don't think anybody we've read thinks quite like Hume. There's nobody quite as exhaustive as him, which leads me to believe you would particularly like him, Jonathan.
I would.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe. I didn't get him.
Okay. Okay.
Well, he's kind of
a forest for the trees kind of a situation.
He loves the trees.
Well, that's the whole point. From my perspective, he's like the penultimate empiricist. So, whereas Aristotle is going to come and create this enormous system that seems to have no organization, Hume is going to come and create this enormous system that is immaculately organized. And furthermore, tidbit, I found out he was born in Edinburgh, so he's a Scot essentially, and he published this book in 1739.
Okay.
So a little later, actually. But he did what so many Scots during that span of time did, and that's take bodies of knowledge that beforehand are that they lack structure. They're scattered, and then pull it all into one place. So they're not even inventing anything new. Essentially, you just pull stuff
Right.
that hasn't been connected yet,
Cataloging.
all together into a beautiful catalog, and then all of a sudden everyone can use it if they want to, because they can go right to
Yeah. I think I may have
point with
just
the
run into
subpoint
this
with the subpoint.
totally by accident on a website. Let me just see if I can go back and find it. But you can keep going, Stephen.
Well, that's what he's penultimate empiricist
Yeah.
of philosophy. So he took philosophy and made it empirical, and almost no one or virtually no one before him was able to do that. Even if they built, it doesn't matter how they built their systems, they just weren't empirical. They were essentially random, or they just followed a single train of thought.
Okay. Maybe this is not what I'm thinking of here, but this is what I found. And I've just found this page. I know nothing about it. I don't think any of you probably know anything about this either, because it sounds kind of arcane. But has anybody here ever heard of the Scottish commonsense realism?
Yep. I did a lot of research.
Okay, so Stephen does know about it. Okay. Well, apparently here they have some names. They drop some names in the very first paragraph here. And it looks like they are, according to this summary, they were opposed to the pervasive philosophy of David Hume.
Yes, they were.
So it's sort of like an opposite side or whatnot.
No, interestingly,
So anyhow.
David Hume is an empiricist, which is like British, and then Scottish, they called it like common sense or common sense philosophy that was built during a similar time. Didn't like Hume at all because it was so British. It's empirical.
Okay. Okay.
So
Interesting.
that makes sense. Common sense philosophy is a pushback from the Scots.
Yeah. All right.
I could maybe make one more comment on Hume. I was considering that he could better author than our modern authors. To the extent that I would say it's almost a summary of
Who?
Who?
I didn't know we did anybody more modern than him.
I 100% agree.
No, he is the most modern. Yeah, that's part of what I'm saying.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Like, well, are you done? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
That was my statement. Go ahead.
Particularly, I would say if you think about Descartes and if you think about Bacon, those are people who had these ideas saying this is what knowledge should look like, and someone needs to build it, and it's going to take a long time, maybe generations. But Hume is someone who did it, who built a system of knowledge that they would have loved because it was
So empirical.
rational, and it was empirical, and essentially based on almost a scientific method, applying scientific method to stuff that other people wouldn't apply scientific method to. And perhaps not done correctly, but at least it was done.
Yeah, and follow-up statement that because of that, I actually think I consider widening, changing our scope of modern.
In what way?
At least saying, as far as empiric collections of philosophic thought are concerned, let's not look at those anymore. So if we can find another author that has the style of Hume in this way that we're discussing now, I'd say we're done with that. That's just my recommendation.
To be honest, sorry.
Because you don't really want to do that anymore, is that right, Jacob?
Oh no,
or
I
you think
enjoyed
it's
Hume,
exhausted?
and I would actually read more Hume. I just think
for the club.
I think that what we've done so far with the author Stephen mentioned, as far as our reading list is concerned, as far as our building of the library is concerned, more productive. Not saying that other things wouldn't be productive, but I think we could be even more productive if we would some more diverse.
Yeah, from my knowledge of the chain of philosophers that come after him, there's a lot of people who rail against him, and there's a lot of people that don't do anything at all like what he did.
Yeah.
Like when you compare German philosophy, which we have yet to touch, which I'm very excited to touch, it's night and day. I mean, the way Nietzsche described people like Mill, John Stuart Mill, and Hume as constipated philosophers, whereas the Germans knew how to dance. That's what Nietzsche's
Ouch.
characterization of Hume was. So,
And just in general, I'm excited to move out into these different directions now.
Okay.
That's my recommendation. Have more for the book club portion of the. No, we're in it. So what comes next?
so it was monologue and critical thought. I think if nobody has a critical thought question, then we're basically done.
No, I don't have anything. I don't think I'm even going to
Steven?
try to guess.
No, I don't think so.
All right, meeting adjourned.